All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for tuning in today. You are listening to the Adam Messer Show, and I am your host, Adam Messer, here at WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul, and I am here today talking with my special guest, Lisa Vasquez. Welcome, Lisa. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much. I'm doing great.
I'm excited to have you here. Lisa, everybody, is an author and an editor, and she and her team have a new magazine called the House of Stitched magazine. So, Lisa, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and about the House of Stitched magazine?
So I've been an author for a couple years, probably since about 2014. That was my first published item, the Unsaintly, and so my brand, if you look at anything Unsaintly, is after that first book because it's the baby. Then after that, I decided to get deeper into being an author and how to be a successful author. So I started networking with other authors who I admired or I found to be successful in what they were doing. And I started with offering them things like I will do a gift for you, like a book cover or some advertising marketing graphics if you answer 3 questions for me. And that's how it all began. And then I had another author who I'd been working with for quite some time, helping him out with his WordPress and things of that nature, his Facebook. And he said, you know what, you need to open a pub house. And I was like, well, you're crazy. So I ended up opening the clubhouse around 2016 in January. And one of our main goals was to change the face of indie. It was to change the face of what people consider lower level writing. And we were going to do it one book at a time. And that's pretty much what we did. With COVID, we ended up seeing that it was a struggle for a lot of authors. So we took a step back a little bit, kind of downsized. And we said, how do we get this message out to people? How do we teach them? How do we mentor them? How do we continue our, goal? And
Mm-hmm.
that was the magazine. And that was it.
Very
The magazine
cool.
was born.
Well, I'm excited about that, and and everybody tuning in at home, we're going to be talking about writing and editing and the magazine and all kinds of cool stuff today. Sebastian is here in the studio, and he's going to be playing some live music for us. How you doing, Bass?
I'm doing good.
Good, good. You start back to school this week, don't you?
Yeah, on Wednesday.
I'm excited about that. So, all right, everybody, this is Sebastian Messer. He's going to be playing some live music here on the Adam Messer Show. That's awesome, Bass. Good job. Did you hear that, Lisa?
I did. I love acoustic guitar. It's great.
Awesome. And we got a message, Bass. Darlene and Terry are listening in. They said that they love the sound. So thank you, Darlene and Terry, for listening in. So yeah, Lisa. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting small circle how the world works or whatever. But I had seen the House of Stitch through the Horror Writers Association group or whatever, and then I saw that you had interviewed Dacre Stoker, and
Mm-hmm.
for the most recent issue or whatever. And then I saw you on TikTok, and I was like, well, let me reach out. And it turns out that you knew Candace Nola, and you knew these other folks, and then just happened to work out that we could do the show this weekend, which is really awesome. So I appreciate you being here on the show, and I think it's pretty cool.
Definitely a pleasure. Yeah, we've been kicking up the marketing a little bit. Like I said, with COVID, we kind of pulled back just a little, and then with the magazine, we're trying to get that message out. So we
Mm-hmm.
were like, let's just go in, head first, and started marketing everywhere. But also, I interviewed John Palisano, who's the president
Mm-hmm.
of Horror Writers Association, and you're correct. The horror world is a very small family. So just sometimes it's, you know, giant apartment buildings and we all live close by, but you know, have our space. And sometimes it's a little village, but we're all on the same island, I
Mm-hmm.
think. So John Palisano used to be my mentor when I first started the Horror Writers Association. And then after that, we just kind of kept in contact and, you know, kept talking and whatnot. And when he became the president, I said, definitely, we got to get that message out. So let me
Mm-hmm.
interview you. And he was all down for it. So he'll be in the winter issue.
And that's interesting you say that because he's going to be on my show on August the 29th.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got some new stuff coming out. So
Yeah, and I saw like some of the other folks like that you have interviewed. That I've had them on my show as well, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I was like, I gotta get in touch with you. We got to talk, and I'm glad because you know, I'm a small print publisher, and I started writing around 2013, 2014, and my first novel that I wrote, it was like, you know, when you kind of dip your toes in the water. It took me like 12 months to write it, and I was only writing like when I was inspired and all this other stuff. And I was like, ugh. Now I look back and I'm like, whatever. But it was crazy because I sent it over to a friend of mine, and they were like, yeah, they're kind of hesitant to give me some feedback. And after a couple of months, I was like, hey, you know, what did you think? And they were like, well, you know, I was like, just tell me. You know, it's not gonna hurt my feelings. Just tell me. And they're like, well, it's just, you know, it's really bad. And I was like, oh, okay, you know. So I put it on the shelf for a while, and I started writing again, but nothing, you know, whatever. But I published my first book in 2018, and then actually I started Valhalla Books. Well, I started this thing called Savannah Quill in 2016. It's a book convention. We connect writers and readers to promote literacy here in Savannah. And I do like different charitable events and stuff like that. And we raise money for the Ronald McDonald House and all that. But I wanted to do something to separate that from publishing. Mm-hmm. So I started Valhalla Books a year ago, February, as a way to have a separate independent small print publisher. And so I thought it was so cool seeing your magazine. And I actually bought a copy and picked it up the other day. I was looking through it. I haven't read all of it because you've got a ton of stuff in there, but yeah, the formatting is really nice and all. And you know, after talking to with you the other day, you know, I really enjoyed talking with you. So it is such a small world out there. I mean, like, you know, we're all trying in the creative world. When I don't care if it's writing, publishing books, making music. You know, like my son's a musician. He's got his own band. Making film, you know, whatever it is that you're trying to make something to put it out there. Comic books, like Terry, my friend Terry and Darlene, they have a comic book called Steve Range Comics that they publish. So I think it's interesting when you have people out there who are doing it, and you know, because getting it done and published and putting it out there, that's, you know, a huge thing. It's a huge step. Right. I remember going to one of Jonathan Mayberry's seminars, and he was saying that, like, of all the people that write and all the different, you know, whatever, only like 1% of them actually publish.
Right.
And, you know, and then there's even fewer people that publish another book or another book. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and he just celebrated his 15th anniversary of writing, and he was like 48 when he first published.
Right.
So, you know, and that guy, you know, super down to earth, you know, gentleman and really friendly guy.
Jonathan's
and,
amazing.
Yeah. I had him on the show and, you know, talking with him, and it was just a pleasure. So that's one of the things I enjoy, talking with other creative people, other people who are out there actually, you know, doing the work and, you know, sharing that experience or sharing, you know, these conversations with people. So
it's an interesting world because, you know, like you said, what the underground, when you're talking about like underground music, a lot of people celebrate that, right? They seek it out, they go for it, and they feel like they're
it's edgy because it's something
group.
Different. Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you've never heard of this band? What do you mean? And they're like, oh, you just listen to all that, you know, pop stuff. And, you know, they look at the radio like almost like, no, I don't want to look at all that. But then you talk about an indie author And people are like, oh, you published a book, and they're like, tell me about it. And you say, well, I'm independent, or I work with a small press, or I self-published.
Mm-hmm.
And then they sort of just shut off right immediately. They're like,
Yeah.
oh. So we wanted to really just change that, because you should be proud when you finish a book and you have that book sitting in your hands. That could be, like you took 12 months to write yours.
The very first
took,
one, yeah.
Mine took 10 years. So you're
Yeah.
way ahead of me on that, and
Well,
when
and
I
that's the
put it
thing
together,
too. Like the ones after that, I took time to learn the not the writing process per se, but learn about the skills and the parts
right.
necessary for finishing a draft, and then learning like story structure and stuff like that, and
Right.
so it does. I mean, I feel the same way. It doesn't matter if it took you 10 years or I know a lady that she said it took her 29 years to write her book, and I'm like, hey, you got it done.
Yeah.
You know.
And the hardest part for a new author, somebody who's brand new, who's never done it before, the hardest part is finishing the book.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest part for a more veteran author is probably the edits. I think you have to live with this book for however long, doing all your research and trying to use the skills that you learned over time. And then when you get those edits back, you're like, oh, you got to keep going through and keep going through. By the time you're done, you're like, you don't even want to look at that book for until it's published. Like, just get out of my face until then. So I think that's probably the sign that you are more established and that you're more comfortable in what you're doing, is that the easiest part is just getting the words down, and the hardest part will be the editing.
I've noticed too, since I started a publishing house, that a lot of different people approach me about publishing and writing and things like that, and I had a person, and I get people that, I'm sure you do too, but I get people that approach me for reviews and stuff and whatever, and so I had two stories. One, a person asked me if I was interested in publishing a short story last week, and I was like, well, short answer is yes, long answer is it depends on when, right? Because I wouldn't mind working with this person. So they sent over the short story, and I noticed I noticed some common errors, like comma issues and italics and stuff like that, the use of words like that and was a lot, and so I just sent it back over. I mean, but the bones were there. The story was there. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I just sent a message back saying, hey, you got a good story here. Here's some quick editorial things that you need to work on that can help you or whatever. And then, but the weird thing about it was when they sent me the story, they said at the same time that someone else had, like, they had posted an excerpt, and that another editor was interested in the story. And I was like, well, that might be good for you, because right now I don't have a place for it. I don't have a home for it. Not that, I wouldn't mind publishing it, but I'm not planning on, I've got other projects that we're working on publishing this year. I don't have an anthology, and I really don't want to do a standalone story that's, less than 10,000 words. Because I could do I guess I could do like a 99-cent thing or whatever, but I just didn't want to. I just didn't think it felt like it was right for it. But that's the kind of thing that that I've seen. The other story was working. Oh gosh, I forgot what it was, but it was another editorial thing. I just can't think of it right this second. But have you had that same kind of experience where people will approach you and ask you, like, hey, can you look at my story, or hey, would you be interested in publishing this, or?
Oh yeah, definitely. So as soon as they see you're a publisher, especially again for new authors, they want to know the answers to that. And our most successful writing panels have been about the process of writing, what publishers are looking for, what editors, common mistakes that editors look for, things like that. People are really interested in that, with the invent of Amazon allowing you to self-publish. So, and we try to tell people all the time, like, just because you can put words on paper doesn't mean you should upload it and sell it. Like, you have to, when you're crafting a story, you want it to be authentic, you want it to be your voice, but you want to be the cleanest version you can,
right,
to do that. And that doesn't mean, and we've all been there, doesn't mean having your friend who speaks really good English and has, good grades. Like, that's not an editor. That could be somebody that maybe read your story and give you some tips, but you definitely need to do whatever you can to get yourself a good editor. And I tell them that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, you know, my style and your style of publishing is horror, right? But that doesn't mean that our style, like, some people use Chicago style, some people use a different style. So our preferences also fit into that. And so when you bring me a book, and for example, I will publish extreme horror, I don't want to get boxed into that. So,
Yeah,
I
don't.
kind of have
I
to,
don't
I kind
either
of have
with
to
the.
balance things out, like, because you
Yeah,
get a whole
no.
bunch of them. And I feel bad because I know that they're just looking for a home for this story and not a lot of people will take it. And I'm like, well, I
Mm-hmm.
will, but I just don't want to be
Well,
boxed into just that.
that's the thing with Valhalla Books. We publish. Well, I publish, and I've got a team of people that I work together with. And we all have different strengths and suits that we all do. But I publish sci-fi, fantasy, horror,
Hmm.
mystery, spec fiction. Um, that's what we've been focusing on. But there's been quite a few like extreme horror that I'm just like, nope, I'm sorry,
Hmm.
just not interested in publishing
Yeah.
that.
It's not that I wouldn't be interested. It's just that you get boxed into it, and then you're just a horror,
Yeah.
company, and that's not what. And actually, the funny story is that Tommy Clark, who is one of my authors, that's how he got published by me. He brought me a book that he had formatted
Mm-hmm.
and self-published himself. He just bought a bunch of samples. He said, "I would love if you would publish this."
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Here you go. Here, read it." And I was like, "Okay." Well, I think I got home. It was a short read. And I got home and I said, "You know what? Absolutely, I'm going to publish this
Nice.
because." It was not only was it an amazing story, but his approach was just so, like, he wasn't in my face. He was just
Yeah.
very, very calm
Yeah.
about it. And he presented me with something that he worked really hard on. And I thought, if he's going to put that much effort into it, and it is a good story, yeah, definitely, I'm going to publish it. Now he's doing really well.
That's great. We
I
got to
had
do the
mentored him for a
station
little
ID real
while
quick
too.
too,
Sure.
Lisa.
Go ahead.
You're listening to the Adam Messer Show here today on WRULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. Yeah, that actually reminded me of the other story I wanted to share with you. Had a person, and talking about a book review, but I had a person that they'd ask me if they could send me a review copy, and I just tell people no because I don't have a ton of time, and it has to be
Hmm.
something I'm interested in looking at anyway. But I told the person yes, and then they messaged me and that they received the author copies and they noticed some errors or whatever, and that if I wanted to wait, I could wait and they get the updated version or whatever. And I was like, as a small print publisher, I understand that there's going to be, errors, but like you said, you want to try to have the best quality that you can. There's
Hmm.
always going to be something like you can have a book that's perfect. You can have everything is tooth and nail to the T. But we're all human, and I
Right.
told the person, I was like, a good story is a good story. I'm not really so much worried about, small errors or whatever. That's not going to detract, from the story,
Hmm.
and I think that's one of the things that with the internet, and I know this sounds really
Yeah.
crazy, but when I try to explain this to people about printing a book, like when it's me and my four friends that I work with this publishing company, it's us doing this.
Right.
We
Hmm.
don't have hundreds of writers, staff writers doing a screenplay for a major, studio production. You know what I mean? It's 4 or 5 people, maybe 2 or 3 people working on a project, you know?
And they have to understand too that you're not getting paid this exorbitant amount to make
Right.
your living. Let's say your day job. So
Right.
you have a day job on top of that. You're not getting paid to stay at home and just for 8 hours focus
Right.
on this book. You've got a limited time and deadline. So like you said, human error, there's always going to be an issue. And there's issues in Stephen King's books. I'm sorry. If
Oh,
you look
yeah.
at some of these top published books that do have the income, you're going to find mistakes. We just want to make sure that when my book, like when our book sits on the shelf and sits next to Stephen King or, Jonathan Mayberry or,
Yeah.
any of these, that you cannot tell the difference
You're not
of
going to turn away
self-published
because
book.
it's not produced right.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. I know. And the weird thing about it, like you were talking about the stigma of like trying to help indies be more professional and help alleviate some of that stigma. And it is true. Like it's almost like with underground music or whatever. It's like, oh, that's real cool. Have you heard this, this band, and they're only out of, whatever. Right. And they only play at these little, whatever. And you have to have a secret password to get to the door, that kind of thing. But then when you tell somebody like, oh, hey, you like vampire books? Oh, okay. Well, I have a vampire series. Oh, you wrote it? Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the weird thing about it is, and this is one of the things I love about TikTok, is that, and this is true for just about everybody I've ever talked to, but people who don't know you will support you a lot sooner than the folks that know you. And
True.
when it comes to like this kind of stuff, I don't get it. I mean, like, I try to support. I know why I do it, because I like supporting other people's stuff that, because they're the same boat as me, but it's stuff that I like. Like I bought a copy of the House of Stitch magazine, not because you and I had a good conversation the other day, but because I was like, oh, this looks good. That was a factor. I enjoyed talking with you. That was a factor for sure. But I also wanted to familiarize myself with the magazine before you came on the show. I don't know. I mean, it's just one of those things. It's like, you put out a good product, you got to put out a good product. And, could somebody look at your magazine and say, well, I would have done this better, I would have done that? Yeah, of course they could have.
Absolutely.
But you didn't. You're not the one making the magazine, so.
Right. Exactly.
Like, where's your magazine at the critique?
Right.
Where's your book at the critique?
There's always going to be the couch, critics, like, the critics off of the Muppets,
Yeah, that's exactly it.
They're always going to be there
peanut
saying
gallery.
how much it could have been better, but they're not doing. And so for me, I'm like, well, you know what, my progress shows in, like, if you look at our first magazine, it's great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't, we hadn't gotten there yet.
Right,
we hadn't gotten to the vision that we wanted. But when you start getting better at something, then you show that progress. And some people are going to be along for the whole ride, running alongside you in that 5K. And then others are just going to be like, good luck. Good luck. Okay, thanks.
Well, one of the things, like the other day we were talking, I had for Valhalla Books, I had and this is with Savannah Quill, when I was doing the publishing through Savannah Quill, because I did a magazine back in like 2017, and the doing the same kind of interviews and that kind of stuff, and I was like, I did a one-off, and this year I did 4 magazines of the the Storytellers Mag is what it's called. And, we were talking about, production the other day, like, what programs we use. I used Microsoft Word for part of it. And then I used PowerPoint, for putting it together, and made a PDF from it. And I put it out for free, and what I did though was I scrapped my email list, because I wanted to start over with folks who are really I'm not going to beg somebody to check the stuff out. I want to show them, and I want to, offer it to them. But I don't want people just signing up just because they're like, oh, it's, Adam's doing something, I'll just sign up for it. And then they never look at the emails, or they never check out, like, I have friends that are like, oh, you've been doing the radio show for a while? I'm like, yeah. Do you ever listen? No. Okay. I've been doing it for 3 years. Like I'm glad, I've had, and it's so weird, but I've had people that will ask to be on the radio show and have never listened to it. And I'm like, well, why would you want to be on the show if you don't know what it's about? That doesn't even make sense. You just want to be on the radio? Right. And there are people like that. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because, like, the reason why I scrapped the email list last year and started over was because I wanted to connect with people who, like you're in the field, you're doing the same kind of things that I'm doing. You like the things that I like. We have similar interests, like I've been nerding out about the Transformer stuff, but I wouldn't go talking to somebody about Transformer stuff if, like, they're not into Transformers. It just doesn't make sense, but somebody who is into Transformers, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, did you know today is the 35th anniversary of the Transformers movie being released in theaters? Oh yeah, it is. And
it's how it can be applied to what you're doing when you're writing and when you're,
Yeah.
when you're doing these books. If you have lost your audience, so if you start talking about something, your audience is not interested, you've lost them. You have to engage them. And we had talked about this on our phone call previously, but we talked about how, people buy you.
Right. Right.
So if you have engaged them and you and I are like, okay, well, we're really interested in what each other are saying and what we talk about in our interests, you're passionate about it and you share my passion and we geek out about it, then we support each other and we constantly are, it's a network of, like I said, it's a very small village on this island. And, nobody else can we go to and start talking about like, oh my God, I gotta go format this book and then I have to edit.
Right.
And they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Oh no, I know. That is, I try to tell people, this is one of the jokes that I laugh about, but writing and publishing is the most amount of work I've ever done for the least amount of pay.
Absolutely.
It has a huge potential. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I would love to be, independently wealthy from my publishing and writing. I'm not going to lie, because that would be
it's the dream.
Yeah, that would be great. But it is the most amount of work I've ever done for the least amount of pay. There are other jobs out there that I could make more money at and not have to do as much work.
You can't do this, what we do, without truly having a passion and love for what you're doing. You just can't.
You have to love it.
You absolutely can't.
And, like you were talking about working with the different author, when you at the beginning, when you're talking about, and I'd love to explore this a little bit more, we got to do the station ID break here in a minute for the underwriting. But when you're talking about value propositioning, when you wanted to interview these folks, you say, hey, I can do a cover. I can do a cover art for you, or I can do a graphic, or I could do whatever. I'd like to ask you these 3 questions. Would you please, mentor me in this way or whatever,
Correct.
Then when the guy approached you with the same style of proposition, you were open to it because he was like, hey, I've got something, of value. I'm not just trying to, leech the system here.
Right.
Then you were like, yeah, that works. Let's do this.
That's somebody who's serious.
Yeah, you could tell, and I'm sure that you've had these people too, but like sometimes I get folks and I'm like, I had one person that emailed me and they were like, well, my book didn't do really well with the first publisher. It's been out for 7 years and I'd like to see if you'd be interested in carrying it or whatever. And I wrote back, I was like, I'm sorry, we don't have any openings right now. A couple weeks later, they emailed me back the same question, like they had never read. And I was like, why would I waste my time, and when I wrote back, I just copied and pasted the exact same thing that I had sent them. And they're like, oh, I did read that. I wasn't paying attention. And to me, I was thinking,
do you want to publish them at all?
I'm like, if you can't handle an email, I mean, how are we going to work together on a big project, And
absolutely.
And, and then a red flag right off the bat was, like, well, I get it. Like if you got a good story, maybe you don't have good support, but, it's really, the story is your baby. That's you. It's not me. Yes, the vehicle is the publishing agent or the publishing house or whatever. I'm the vehicle, but I'm not the destination and I'm not the driver.
Correct. Absolutely.
The author is the driver and the destination is the journey in the book.
We're just the fancy car. We're the fancy car.
Yeah.
You got to drive it.
Yeah, exactly. Lisa, can you hold on for a second here? We're going to do the station breaks. Everybody, this is the Adam Messer Show. I'm your host, Adam Messer, here today with my special guest, Lisa Vasquez, who is a publisher and a writer, an editor, and among other things. And you're here today on WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And please stay tuned while we do these station underwriting announcements.
What does it mean when we say that WRUU is a community radio station? It doesn't just mean that we invite the community to create programming. And it doesn't just mean that we are a voice for the community. It also means that we are counting on the community to keep us going. And you are the community. Almost all of our modest budget comes from small annual or monthly donations from listeners like you. You get to enjoy our community-focused programming because many others have stepped forward to do their part. Now do your part by joining our community of listener donors. Go to WRUU.org right now and make a one-time or monthly donation. And thank you for supporting Savannah's community radio station, 107.5 FM.
This is a message from the Georgia State Department of Public Health. There is a State of Georgia hotline people can call with questions or if they think they may have been exposed to the COVID-19 virus. It is 1-844-442-2681. If you believe you're experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 or have been exposed to the novel coronavirus, please contact your primary care doctor, an urgent care clinic, or your local federally qualified healthcare center. Please do not show up at an emergency room or healthcare facility unannounced. More information can be found at dph.georgia.gov. This portion of WRUU Savannah Soundings programming is provided by listeners and by Brighter Day Natural Foods. Brighter Day Natural Foods has been serving Savannah's healthy food and supplement needs since 1978. It is located at the corner of Bull Street and Park Avenue. They have available online ordering and curbside delivery, and now a walk-up window for smoothies, juices, and sandwiches from the deli. They are open from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 12 to 5:30 p.m. on Sunday. More information can be found at brighterdayfoods.com.
All right, everybody. So we are back. Oh, we got another message in. Let's see. Oh, that's from Revolver. Oh, they're talking about a new. See, I've got this through my phone, but they're talking about a new album that's coming out. I'm like, what? You know, speaking of Transformers, there's this band that's like a tribute band, but they dress up and cosplay like the Transformers.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I think they're called Cybertronic Spree. And they had an album release Friday, and it sold out. Now, I have the digital version of it, okay? But this is a vinyl pressing that they had released, and they sold out, like, within a couple of hours or whatever. And I was like,
That's
man,
great.
yeah, that's great for them. Not for me, but, you know, because I wanted a copy of it. But, you know, that's one of the things, like, they're an indie, you know, band. And but they've just put out, you know, they put out these really cool videos, and like they've done covers of like Barracuda and some other songs, like, you know, in these Transformer costumes and all, you know. And it's a good example, I feel like, of when you like something, you know, you geek out about it, then you're like, you want to know more about it, or you want to read more about it, or like you like that kind of, you know. Like, for example, with me, with the Transformer stuff, I went and picked up some comic books today. They have a new Transformer comic out today or this week or whatever, and I picked it up. I'm looking forward to reading it. You know, the 35th anniversaries of the movies out today, you know, all these different things or whatever, you know. And I feel like that's the same way with any form of entertainment. You know, when you like something, like my friend's, you know, comic book, Steve Range Comics, it's an indie comic that they print themselves and they distribute themselves here in Savannah. And it's awesome. It's like well, the way he describes it, he watched a lot of Bullwinkle and Rocky and Bullwinkle and read a lot of the Mad comics, and so it's that kind of, like, you know, humor, you know, like that absurd type of, and I love it. I came across him because I was at the record store and I saw one of the indie comic books, one of his comics, right there on the front shelf, and I was like,
Right.
oh, this is something different, this is something cool, well, let me look it up. And I emailed him off of his website, and we have become friends the last couple of years after that. Really good friends with him and his wife, you know.
That's
and
awesome.
yeah, and that's one of the things I think is so cool, when, you know, you're into something and you like it, you know, and you have someone else who is, you know, connected with it, and they like it. You know, you just kind of geek out about it. And that's that, going back to with the magazine and you working with the publishing and all. I think that when we were talking Friday, you were talking about, you know, you want to share these different best practices and overcoming, like, you know, obstacles and stuff like that. You want to share, you know, how somebody can start living that dream that they want to do. And can you talk more about that? Because I think that's so cool the way that you have it set up, and that you've been building it up, and making the progress and improving it over time. So can you talk more about that?
So when we started the magazine, the first time we did the run, I didn't have the time because of the publishing, like you said. It's a struggle when you have so many things on your plate. So the adage that do one thing and do it well is, especially when you have ADHD as bad as I do, I started out with having like 25 tabs open, and okay, I'm editing a book over here, and then I'm doing this. And I thought, you know what, with COVID, there was a lot of self-reflection. And so I said, what is my goal? What is my why? And when I sat down and I had that whole year to really figure out what my why was, everything else kind of fell into place. You start to plan, like, okay, ask people questions. When they're talking about their why, how are you going to get there? How are you going to make it successful? All of these things. And we don't have all the answers. None of us do. But what I set out to do was, these questions that I have, I know everybody else has. And I don't necessarily care about one particular book that you're writing or one particular song that you're writing. What I want to talk about is your process. What got you through the best times, and what got you through the worst times of your life, and how did that affect your writing in the process? And I've learned so much about people, about their process. People will say, oh, well, do you want to know what tools I use? I'm like, well, if that's relevant, but what are some things, like, before I sit down, there's a ritual, right? And before I sit down and write, I have to have like a cup of tea, or I have to have a drink, or has to have complete silence. And if that's interrupted, then what happens? Because we face that every single day. I mean, life happens. So you're sitting at the desk, and maybe the kids are acting up, or the dog's barking, or whatever. And what I learned the most out of all of this was, if you don't commit to the time as if you committed that time to be out of the house at a doctor's appointment, right, then you failed in that first step. So when I started putting together the magazine, I said, the one thing I have to do every time I look at this magazine is, did I achieve my why? And that's pretty much what we did. So when I'm talking to, the creators of, whatever, whether it's tattoos, whether it's writing, whether it's music, whatever, I have to make sure that my why is in there all the time. It was very interesting when I was talking to, Dacre, that, his why comes out in the stories as he's telling it. He's being true to his lineage, he's being true to his heritage. And he really wants to give respect to his family name, and that's important for him. But the why came at, everything else came after the why. When I talked to Danielle Lang, who is the tattoo artist, her backstory is amazing. And yes, a lot of them, I would say in this issue, probably about 3 or 4 of the features, like, I know them personally. So it's even harder to interview them, because you're talking with friends and you're like, well, you just start chatting. But when you start saying, I really want to know about you and this thing that you're so passionate about, they open up a whole lot more. So you have to find people who are just as passionate about what you do, because it inspires you and it gets you pumped up and ready to go for the next thing. Whereas when you're talking to somebody else, you get a little insecure, right? So you're like, oh, I started writing this book. It's just writing this book. And they're like, oh, well, what's it about? Well, it's just a vampire book. No, absolutely not. I want you to tell me that story as if, the reason why you're writing this story is because you're passionate about this idea you had. Tell me about that story. And, people will say to you, oh, I've always wanted to write a book, but I just don't have time. Well, isn't that the key? Like, then that's not what your priority is. What's your priority? Is your priority to be an author? Is your priority to be a writer? Or is it just a hobby? And that's a lot of times when people come into the publishing house, or they want to be interviewed, I want to know that that's their passion, and they'll talk about it until the end of days. But if I get into an interview and somebody's just like, well, it's my first book and I decided to write it. It's like, well, it makes a difference in your environment. So if, for example, we're talking and it's not pulled out, things aren't pulled out, we're very passionate, and so we'll talk about it. But if you have to pull strings to get somebody to tell them, then they still have a little bit of work to do, I think.
I've had that. It's so crazy because I've done a couple hundred of these interviews on the radio, and I've had guests where it's very cohesive and synergetic, and kind of like this one where we're just we're talking and we're really energetic. And I've had other folks that I thought they would be really excited about it, and it was like going and trying to just drill down and drill down and drill down, and they would give short, choppy answers, and and it wasn't because they were nervous, because it's just me and the other person talking. There's not like people watching live or listening, saying, hey, da da da. It's just us, and I've had some folks where they're just, they're very dry. And so, sometimes 2 hours feels like it goes by in 5 minutes. And then sometimes 5 minutes feels like it's dragging out for 2 hours.
Yeah.
But I'm the same way. Like you can feel it. You could tell when someone's legit and they're doing the work, because you do hear the same, y'all, you hear the same things over and over and over again. And like, I'm sure, and I'm not a famous author, and I'm not a famous journalist or radio show host. I'm just a person. I do a lot of interviews, and I publish, and actually this is my 7th year publishing for the Savannah Morning News as a journalist. And I've done a lot of interviews, and I've done a lot of published writing. You hear the same things over and over and over again, over and over and over again, over and over and over again. Like all of those things, people can do research, and they can, and this is a story I shared with Lisa the other day. I'm going to share with y'all. One of the folks that I was talking with, they said that, they weren't really sure what we would talk about for 2 hours. And, they hear a lot of the same questions over and over again, which I can understand that, because even though it is new to you, the other person has probably been asked that same question a million times. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it's still new to you. But it's kind of like one of those things with the forum board where it's like, look up and see if this question's been asked before you ask it.
Yeah, definitely.
And
I think the art of interviewing, it's an art to interview somebody. So yeah, I mean, if you do the research, if you see questions that are asked over and over again, you can ask the same question, but I think the way you approach it is the art form. So if somebody says, okay, look, I saw this answer on there, instead of asking that same question, you can refer back to the interview they had and say, can you expand on that with this question? And you have to, it's one thing to be like, oh, I'm a fan of somebody and I want to interview them. It's another thing to say, I'm a journalist,
right?
I'm a columnist, and take that very seriously.
Yeah. Well, and that was one of the things with this person that I interviewed. I ended up asking them a question. They're like, "Oh, I've never heard anyone ask me that before. No one's ever asked me that before." Or like when they're like, "Oh, that's really interesting." When you, and not that I never try to do like a gotcha moment, but when you have someone that you're talking with them and you're trying to get their story about the thing that they're doing, and you can show them, because like I do a casual conversation. I don't do scripted questions.
Right.
Ever. I have some guests where they'll have like, some talking points, which is really cool. I have some guests that, like they're all over the place, which is fine, because I can corral that back in if, wherever I need to go with it. But I enjoy the non-scripted, because you can take the conversation from one area and just do like open-ended, and you go into, and one of the things I like about what you're talking about with your magazine, talking about the process, that's the same thing I did with my Storytellers Mag. I was asking them the same questions and said, hey, let's talk about like this process. Let's talk about, how did you overcome these obstacles? Let's talk about, what was your routine, or, what were your rituals or whatever. And I think when you study leadership, or you study like, especially people who are very spiritual, you'll notice that they have that kind of, they'll have those same kind of rituals, like like somebody who, and I love this example from Tony Robbins, but he said that, you can look at someone and tell if they work out or not, or you can look at someone and tell if like they're into fitness, because, they show it, you can say, hey, oh, well, I bet you go to the gym. Yeah. But they have different rituals than the person who doesn't, and with people with publishing, oh, we got to do the station ID. Hey, Bass, you want to play some too? It's a quarter till. All right. So everybody, you're tuning in today. You're listening to WRU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. But what I was going to say with the rituals, Lisa, is that you can tell, like with published authors, or it doesn't matter if they're published and they're like best-selling authors, or if they're published and they've been publishing for a while consistently. You can see the difference between the folks that are like, oh, I've always wanted to write a book. Well, do you write? Yeah, I used to have people ask me like, when can I consider myself a writer? Do you write now? No. Gotta start writing. So
yeah, that usually is the way to do that.
Yeah. All right, so Sebastian's gonna play some more for us. This is Sebastian Messer here in the studio playing some live music. Take it away, Bass. Whoa, that was good. Nice. Was that a new one, or was that you noodling, or?
No, it's a little bit of Megadeth.
Oh, okay. See, he noodles and does original stuff. Can you do some original stuff next hour too?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, cool. And I'll tell you something really crazy, Lisa. I'm sure. I'd like to get your spin on this, but like, oh, okay. So Darlene and Terry said, was that Heart? I think it was Megadeth.
No, it was Megadeth, Liar, from their So Far, So Good, So What album.
Oh, okay. All right, gotcha. But Lisa, when we were talking earlier about people that they've asked to be on the radio show but they never listened to the show, I have had people send me like story pitches and they've never read anything that I've published. Have you had that same experience?
And I think there's two type of publishers. Well, they'll just turn somebody
pardon
away.
Me, it cut off right when you started to answer. I'm sorry. Could you?
That's okay.
What was your answer for that?
So there's two type of publishers, or even people. I think somebody who's going to say, "Sorry, we don't publish that," and then there's others like, so another author of mine. When I went to one of the cons, we met there, and it was a new con here in Texas, Scary Dads, and so. When we first met, what we did was we got to know each other. We, got each other's books. And so the next con that we were together, and again, tight family, little village.
Right.
The next con that we were at together, I didn't have the type of book that this person came up and was looking for. So I personally walked them over and introduced them to her. And I was like, if I've read a couple of her books. If this is what you're looking for, this is the woman that you need to do. And since then, Jay Mazer and I became very good friends because we understood that we're not in competition with anybody else.
Right.
We support each other full fledged. But to have people come up, I've had an elder lady came up and talked to me about her surviving, the Nazi camps, and she's like one of the oldest survivors, and she was telling her story and then her family and everything. And I thought, oh my God, like I would love to publish this. But I just don't publish. It would give you no market. And then I had another person who was a friend of a family type thing, and he wrote this story about one of the first New York police horses, and great story. But I'm like, wrong publisher. Like, you understand? I mean, it says Stitch Smile.
Yeah.
Like,
did you? But
Stitch.
maybe.
So,
can I? I'm gonna rephrase my question. So have you had that same experience though, where someone sends you something and they've never read anything that you published?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So obviously, if they come up and they're asking me to publish books about these things, they've never read anything that we published. But to expand on that, yes, there are other people that are in the industry who come in and they're like, "Well, I've never read any of your stuff," and I'm like, "Well, then how do you know this?" And my first question every single time when somebody says, "Hey, I'd like to publish with you," I say, "Why? Why Stitch Smile?"
See, that's why I wonder, I've been trying to tiptoe around that because I kind of look at it, it's like, hey, you didn't do any homework. And I'm not talking about folks like, because there's people that ask me about publishing a lot, publishing a book that has nothing to do with like what I publish, and they just want kind of general advice about how to get started or whatever. That's fine. I'm talking about the folks that are like they're doing what we're doing, and they've never checked out any of my stuff, and I'm like.
I think a lot of times it's because they know somebody or they admire another author that has published with us. And my hope is that they're getting just good feedback from these authors. Like, oh, we're a great company. And sometimes that has happened, but there are a lot of times where they're just, looking for a home, and they're like looking for anybody to publish them. And I tell them all the time, you need to interview me as much as I need to interview you.
Oh yeah.
You have to make sure that this has the right
it's
home.
Not always a good fit.
A lot of time.
Yeah.
We're going to be spending a lot of time together. And if we can't stand each other, then, you've just signed a contract.
I recently had to do that where I was like, this isn't going to gel. We're going to have to, part ways. I appreciate your time. But, because of that same situation where I was like, I'm not really sure this is going to be, the best for both of us,
Yeah.
And so I just had to tell them thank you, but no.
Yeah, we pretty much have a little motto, and it's like either you're all in or you're all out.
I told my friend that. I said the folks that are going to be with us are going to be all in or nothing. And if they're not all in, then it's nothing. Because
and I've released contracts early because I'm just like, I don't feel like we're a good mesh, and I don't want to hinder anybody.
Yeah.
So if I'm not doing what I need to do for you, and you ask me for your rights back, I mean, as long as I've had it for like at least a year, meaning that because I've put a lot of work into it. So if I can, do about a year and see what I can do with it, that's one thing. But I've had some that, it's just not right, and I get it, and that's okay, because like I said, all in or all out. I don't want anybody here who doesn't want to be here.
Well, no.
If you're not happy with what's happening, then you need to find the right home for your book.
In that same talk, that same like area right there, I don't care if it's a small print publisher, like like what I'm doing, what you're doing, or whatever. We don't have a huge budget. I had a friend of mine that I was talking to them about that, and this guy is he's a. And I'm not going to drop any names, okay? But this guy's a pro, and he makes pretty decent money as a consultant, doing IT consulting, and then he also publishes and whatever. And we were talking about it, and he was telling me that the value of a publishing package for a book is about $5,000.
Yes.
Minimum. Minimum. And I'm not talking about like these vanity publishers where people are like, oh, we'll help you get, your dream and sell this book or make no, I'm not talking about vanity publishers. I'm just talking about the value of what labor costs are and production costs are to produce a book and publish the book.
Yes.
$5,000 minimum. And that's like us elbow greasing it. You know what I mean? And
that's not including like your programs to make the cover, to format, to that's not covering any of that. Right.
And so, when he told me that, cause it's kind of funny the things that you learn when you start getting into an industry. But when he told me that, it changed my value perception of the work that I was doing. And because I was like, oh, well, I'm just doing it, I'm just doing it. Like, no, son, you're not just doing it. You got all this work. And, if you're doing, like, one of the things I love, and we got to wrap this hour up in like 2 minutes here. But one of the things I love is when like talking with you the other day, I could tell that you were a doer and that you were a producer. You got stuff done. That was like, for me, I was like, okay, this is great because that's the kind of person I am. I like to get stuff done. You know, what's better than perfect? Done. And so anyway, Lisa, where is the best place that people can check out your stuff?
So for the magazine, you would go to houseofstitchedmagazine.com. For the publishing house, you would go to stitchsmilepublications.com. And if you wanted to look into my stuff, it is unsaintly.com.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm going to put the links into the podcast as well. And everybody, don't worry if you missed any of this interview and you'd like to go back and listen to it. You can go on to your favorite podcast place and look up The Adam Messer Show, or you can go to theadammessershow.com. Or I have been recently listening to a lot of stuff on YouTube. So the YouTube channel has the podcast on it. So it's just youtube.com/Adam Messer. Just trying to keep it easy peasy, cheesy wheezy. So thank you very much, Lisa, for being here with me this first hour. I'm looking forward to the next hour where we can dig a little bit deeper and talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of just the grind and getting stuff done.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.